Hello and welcome again to another version of Stay at Home and Brew It. With you today, I am Brock Torga, and to my right,
I'm Jeff Perot.
otherwise known as Jeff the Pirate. Our mateys.
Yarr.
Today we are talking about formulation of recipes.
Correct.
And this is our second installment of this. Who did you do the other one with?
The last one I did was with Michael.
With Michael. Fantastic. That was a good episode.
Yeah, it seemed to go pretty well. And so for those of y'all who are just tuning in, maybe didn't see the previous one, you can check out the previous introduction to formulating recipe formulation. We did that a few days ago. It's available online. But today what we're going to talk about is we're going to get kind of more into the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about base grains and specialty grains. Now, we could probably do a multi-part series just on this, but we're gonna try and give you as much information as we can in this short period of time to talk about these grains, so that you can begin to have an idea of how you can start formulating some of your own recipes and what all is involved with that. Now, first off, what is malted barley? And why do we use malted barley?
Mm-hmm. Now, can I just go out and say I know a farmer and he grows barley out there? Can I ask him for some barley and make my beer with it?
You could, but you'd have to go through the whole malting process yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So just raw barley is not going to make the beer that you're wanting to make. In fact, it's not going to make much of anything,
No.
except cereal or maybe soup.
No, absolutely. I'm not a huge fan of barley soup, so if anybody has a good one or a good recipe, I'd like to try some. Anyway, malted barley.
So what malted barley is they take the raw grain itself, barley itself, and they go through what's known as a malting process. Now, that process begins with what's called germination.
Which actually grows the kernel, right?
Yes.
So they're gonna have it at a certain temperature and a certain moisture content, right? And this is gonna allow that to grow just like any sort of seed would, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna change the process, the organics on the inside of that kernel.
Correct.
And what's really cool about it is it's also going to create some other enzymes and some other things, that germination process that we need for our brewing process along the way.
Yes. And then after the germination has taken place, at that point, then they begin the process of roasting it. Now, is every grain or every type of malted barley, is it roasted?
No, we don't have a roasted barley here, actually, do we? So several of them, actually, every maltster has a little bit different kind of process. There's a lot of different grains out there that you can use when you're looking at formulating your recipe. And every one of them is done just a little bit different. It's germinated just a little bit different times, a little bit different heats, and then they go through another process. And there's several of them. There's big kilns, big drums that they can put them in. There's also floor malted barleys as well, which is a whole different operation. Kind of the old school method, as it were. A little more difficult, definitely uses a little bit more labor. And it makes a little more of an under-modified malt, which if you're looking for a certain thing in your recipe, you may look into that as well.
Okay. But then don't they at least apply a little bit of heat of some kind?
They do. With every malt, a little bit of heat is going to be, it's going to be kilned some, right? And a lot of people ask me the difference between a two-row and a pale ale.
Okay.
And it's very, very similar between the two, but the pale ale, as I understand, is kilned just a little bit more, just a skosh more. So it's going to have just a little bit more color than your regular two-row. So, but not by much, not even sometimes by the noticeable eye.
Okay. And then, so what we have going on here is the process of germination. Even before that, the growing conditions, the soil that it's in, the amount of rain it receives, all those things tend to affect the flavor of the malt itself in the end. And so, and also as Brock was saying, the way it's kilned, whether it's turned by hand on, floor malted barley, or whether they've got big drums, everything is going to give that malt different characteristics, both in its ability to convert in the starches in it to be converted into sugars, as well as what those are going to taste like. So
I would agree. Let's just give you an idea. It just gives us an enormous range of barleys to choose from. I get phone calls here. Do you guys have malted barley? And it's yes, we do. We carry over 250 different kinds of malted barley, as well as some wheats as well. But that just gives you a huge what are they feeding this soil and where is it? It's like I often tell people it's like a cigar, right? So everybody talks about Cuban cigars, and they say, why is that Cuban cigar so much different than a Dominican or a Honduras or something like that? Well, it's the soil and the content in that soil, and also the climate, and that's very similar to the same thing that's going on in our barleys.
Correct. So, you might have a two-row from the United States, even from different parts of the United States, and it's going to have slightly different characteristics. Raw two-row, Briess two-row, let's see, Great Western, all of those are going to have slightly different flavors and characteristics to them. Now, we actually have, and all those are what are known as base malts. We actually have some base malts with us, or a base grain.
Now, what is a base grain?
Okay. Now, a base grain is a grain itself that has it's going to make up actually the majority or the base of our recipe.
Okay.
That's oftentimes why it's referred to as base grain. So it's going to make up the bulk of our recipe, anywhere from 100% of the recipe to maybe 50%. I mean, it's going to be the kind of the major player in here.
It's generally the bulk of your grain.
Correct. And now different base grains are going to have different characteristics. Like the last episode we had on Friday was about Oktoberfest, and we talked about Munich and Vienna. Those are both base malts. And those have, a lot of kind of toasty kind of
Just maltiness to them.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that general, I guess, but yeah, there's a little more complexity to those.
Correct. Whereas, for instance, right now in front of us, we actually have a British two-row known as Mutton's Planet, an American two-row known as Briess two-row, and we have a German two-row called Irex Pale. Now, as we look at these, and we kind of wanted to talk about them, is each one is going to have some different characteristics from them, or to them. Now, for instance, if we take these, and I'm going to put them over here in front of the camera so Tyler can actually zoom in on them.
So these base malts are where we're going to get most of our sugar for our beers. If you're doing an extract, you're still going to have some base malt there. So if you buy a kit from us, generally what we're going to do if you buy an extract kit is we're going to put our specialty malts into a bag, and you're going to do a steep with those. The majority of your sugars that comes from that base grain, the maltster has already mashed for you and dehydrated out the water, and that's our DME. So this is just that, only when we're doing an all grain, we have to make up for that. Instead of using that DME, a major portion of our bill is going to be one of these base malts.
Yes. So for right here, we've got the Mutton's Planet, which is a British. We have the Irex right here, which is German. And then we have the Briess, which is the American. Now,
Can you see that, Tyler? You see them pretty good? So you can even see from just a visual analysis there's a great difference between the American two-row and the German.
correct. So, I mean, you can see the husks look a little bit different. The German one seems to be a little plumper.
A little plumper, yeah. A little more homogeneous looking too. It just means that they're very similar looking.
Yeah. And the Mutton's Planet also has a nice look to it.
Yep, a little darker in stature, I think, and this would make sense too. This is a two-row, and this here is a pale. So we were talking about that being kilned for just a little bit longer, which would give it a little bit, I think, of that darkness as well. But it looks like the Mutton's is actually the darkest at all three of those malts. Now, I'm not sure what the Lovabond is on there. We maybe should have looked that up.
Yeah, but now, you visually can see one thing, but as we get to this point, we look at the idea of taste. And we should, you want to start with the Muttons?
I think we'll probably start with the Briess.
All right, we'll start with the Briess.
So I'm getting a little bit of sweetness.
A little bit.
It tastes a little husky to me. Which it's a base malt, so a little bit of husky is okay. I'm not getting a whole lot of complexity. Nothing's really jumping out at me, making me. What are you picking up on?
I'm getting the sweetness, the huskiness as well, but also what I'm getting is just kind of
It seems a little grassy.
a little bit grassy. It's very plain.
It is very plain.
Which is not a bad thing. A lot, these are things to keep in mind as you're formulating your own recipe. Of what do you want to build on? This is kind of the foundation you build on.
Say maybe if I was doing an American light lager or international pale lager or something like that, where I really don't want a whole lot of that maltiness to stand on. I just want an easy, crystal clear, just session patio pounder. I think maybe something like this would work great.
Yeah, I think it would too. Now then, as we move on, should we do the IRX or the
Let's do the IRX pale. I think the
right.
Muntins will have a little more flavor.
All right, we'd try the IRX. Kernels are definitely bigger.
I get a little less huskiness, a little less grassiness. The sweetness is almost lowered. I'm not getting quite as much sweet as I was with the two. The sweetness is there still.
Yeah, but I'm getting much more of a malt flavor from it.
I think that there's definitely a bigger complexity in that grain, and I think overall, if you were going to do just a straight pale ale or something like this, I think this would be a really nice malt. I also think it'd be a really nice malt for a stout or something like that as well.
I think it'd also be a nice one for a blonde.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Get with you want a little bit of complexity, but not too much.
And
Kind of
just
keep
get
it
a nice
interesting.
golden color, but you'd have some malt complexity there. It's really nice. That sweetness is kind of coming out in the back here now.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going to try I urge you to try some malt analysis. It's really fun, and it'll really allow you to have a better idea on how to formulate your recipe. What are you using? Don't just call it a Crystal 60. I mean, we've got 3 different Crystal 60s.
Exactly.
Everyone's going to have a different taste and flavor to it. So when you're putting your recipes together, you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Look at the grain.
Exactly. For those of y'all who like to cook, you don't just take salt and you throw it in. I mean, there's different kinds of salt, different flavors. I mean, you don't have, if you don't just take a pepper and throw it in. There's different heat for jalapenos, serranos, poblanos, and everyone has different flavors. As a cook, you taste your ingredients, and as a brewer, we need to be able to learn to taste our ingredients as well. Now, the third base malt we have is the Muntins Planet, which is a British malt. Now,
so this is a new varietal that Muntins just put out. And it used to carry what was called Propino, was their regular 2-row. So as I understand it, what I like to tell people, this malt is about halfway between a pale 2-row and a Maris Otter. So you're going to get a lot of breadiness. That's a good malt.
yeah, that is.
It's got a really nice sweetness to it.
Yeah, a lot of sweetness up front.
But you're going to get a lot of body out of this as well. So not as much as like a regular Maris Otter, which maybe we should have tried some Maris Otter as well. But it's not as husky. It's not going to have that astringent value. That has gone on it. It's also very, very modified, which just means it's been germinated. As time has gone on here, they've gotten their genetics down. Their germination processes are getting a lot better. So the conversions in these grains are going to happen a lot easier. The enzymes that are in there have been boosted. These sorts of things have made this grain to convert the starches in there into sugars easier. And this is a very, very highly modified grain, so you're going to get a huge amount of extract out of this as well.
So I mean, this would be a great one for a base for obviously any British beer. But then I think you could use it also for a number of other beers too. I think it'd be a great one just in an American IPA.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's something that you wanted a little more body in.
Yeah.
I think your blonde idea, I think it would make a fantastic blonde. I know a lot of the guys are using it for hazies as well. I know that's kind of a hot thing. I've been seeing a lot of guys substitute it for the Golden Promise.
Okay. Yeah, because it has a lot of nice character to it. So that Muntins Planet would be also a good base malt to do. But again, keep in mind, what is your end result, or what is your end result that you're trying to achieve when putting together this recipe for a beer?
We just had 3 pale malts here that were absolutely completely different tasting.
Correct.
Which is awesome. So, and another thing, whenever you're doing a taste analysis, just a couple of kernels will do you fine. You don't want to, take a handful of this stuff and be crunching on it.
You don't need to be popping melanoidin like I was last episode.
Like popcorn.
So once you decide your base malt, and the base malt also can be dependent upon your recipe too. Obviously, you would want a Munich or Vienna for a German style Oktoberfest or something like that, like we talked about last time. But
let me ask you
Sure.
a quick question. Would I use, would I choose two different ones? Would I want to stick to generally one base malt for that style or for that beer that day?
I mean, you can do any. Well, we can obviously do anything we want as home brewers.
Sure.
So I mean, you could do 5 or 6 base malts, but that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because, at least to me, because you begin to get kind of a muddy sort of a characteristic in the beer itself.
I think so. So you have all these different flavors that are kind of
Correct.
competing to come out, and I find that that's true too. So generally, if you're going to make a good recipe, again, simple is always a good way
Yes.
to go. So generally stick with one base malt. I
Yeah.
would say that's what I like to do.
Oh yeah, and learn about that base malt too. And one of these things is you might want to say, all right, I'm gonna, I've got a number of recipes. I've oftentimes used Brees. I'm gonna try Mutton's Planet for a while on it, or the RX Pale. Change out sometimes the base malt, become familiar with it, familiar with what it does.
Yeah.
You might like what it does with the recipe, or you may not.
Yeah, like doing a side by side or something, and only
Oh,
change
yeah.
that. Is that what you're?
Oh, yeah.
That's what you're saying. Okay, so we have some other grains over here.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of gone over some base malts. I didn't see any questions about that. So what is a specialty grain?
Specialty grains. Specialty grains are interesting because in specialty grains or specialty malts, we start getting a lot of interesting characteristics coming out in your beer. We have a variety of crystal malts that have different colors and have some different things, anywhere from caramel to toffee to bready, biscuity, toasty. All these things that can come
Your
from those malts.
melanoid and aroma.
Oh yeah, you get all kinds of interesting aromas that can come out from it, toffee and caramel and all these things like that are really beautiful.
Absolutely, and crystals will go anywhere from. I mean, we have a crystal 2, and we also have a crystal 240. So there's a huge range in here, and then all the way to a special B or something, which I think is even more than that. Or is that around?
I want to say.
I don't know.
I'm not sure what the love bond of
I
crystal
think it's
is
around
offhand.
120 maybe.
Okay.
Regardless.
I think you're right. But yeah, so I mean, you can have a variety of things, and even like the Special B, which we'll get into here in a little bit, you get some interesting raisin notes to it, kind of dark fruit, plum, some things like that going on that can be really beautiful in Belgian-style beers that are a little bit darker. Or it could be something you add just as a smidge in a recipe, just to kind of add a little something in there, a little je ne sais quoi, we say.
If you will, yes.
If you will.
Oui, oui. Okay, yeah, so they're just going to, now, I mean, it's germinated, and
Yes.
they're going to put it in this kiln then at some point, or the drum, or however that maltster is doing that particular thing. Now, is there a difference between crystal and caramel?
That's a good question. I've always thought the term was just done interchangeably.
Generally it is now. The British will tell you differently.
Really? Okay.
Their crystal malt is supposed to be just crystal malt, and I think it's some process of kilning that they do. So I know when the British talk about crystal, they're meaning it to be something a little differently. However,
Okay.
mostly it's interchangeable. So we have a German caramel malt here, and we also have a British crystal malt, and I would use them interchangeable. I wouldn't
Okay.
get stuck on these things. It's like the BJCP, and it has to be exactly those sorts of things. Have a little
Gotcha.
bit of freedom with yourself as well. It's homebrew after all.
Have fun.
We can relax and have a good time doing this.
Yeah.
Do you want to do some analysis
Sure.
here?
We actually have 3 different kinds. Well, actually, all of them are crystal or caramel 60s. I'm going to put these here so Tyler can zoom in for us. We've got we've got an Irex here. We've got a Brees, and we've got a Muttons. So we've got Germany, America, and Britain all together in one locale.
All right.
So little United Nations there in 3 cups.
Can you see that, Tyler?
Excellent.
Okay, fantastic. So as a visual analyst, I think first, let's start with the American.
All right, the American back here. Let's see. Kind of reminds me of the 2-row, the base malt earlier. A little bit smaller kernels.
So it looks like it might be a little bit more brittle, a little bit beat up, if you would.
Looks kind of like that. Yeah.
And that could just be whatever kilning process that Breeze uses.
Yeah. Let's see the Irex. Let's see, the husks look a little bit different, but also kind of
Yeah, it kind of got that same look to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does kind of have that same look. Not quite as much as the Brees, but it's kind of like that. And then the Muttons is interesting. I mean, the grains
Very
seem
plump, very intact.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Very large kernels as well.
Yeah. Now all three of these are crystal or caramel 60s.
60, right.
Okay. So let's see. Let's try the Brees first.
Okay.
I get like a burnt sugar.
I do get that same kind of burnt melanoidin taste to it, yeah. It's the kernels seem like they're a little harder to crush.
A little bit.
There's some sweetness there. I'm getting I'm getting a caramel to it for sure, but it's kind of light. It's lighter than I would think for a Crystal 60.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely kind of get that kind of a burnt flavor to it
Yeah.
as well. So.
I mean, it's not offensively burnt or anything like
not
that.
at all, not at all, and not like a roasted.
No.
We should get some roasted. Would you grab us some roasted barley, Cedric? Hey, bro. Would you grab us some roasted barley? Pretty please.
Yeah, what's barley?
Cedric's gonna fix us up with some here. Everybody loves Cedric. So are you picking up on anything else there?
No, I mean mainly. I mean, for me, it was kind of the overwhelming, almost burnt sugar thing, kind of hit
Okay.
me the most.
Okay.
So,
Let's try the Muttons next.
okay, try the Muttons.
Thank you,
guys
sir.
Thanks.
Just pour it right there on the table.
Yep, that works.
Okay. I'm getting not quite as much sweetness in
No.
this that I did in the Breeze. I'm getting kind of a strong aftertaste that's almost a little like a bitter dryness kind of a thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's making me really thirsty, actually, which might not be a bad thing.
I'm almost getting a.
And I don't know if I'm getting as much caramel flavor out of that.
No, I'm almost getting almost a little bit of a raisiny quality in the background.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Okay. Now next we have the RX. Totally different.
Totally different. That kind of dry bitterness is completely gone there. That's not there on that aftertaste at all.
There's more
I'm
sweetness.
getting a lot of sweetness out of it. And there's a lot of caramel kind of coming on now.
Yeah.
It's been like a lot of caramel coming on, like in your face.
That's tasty.
It is.
I'm not melanoid tasty, but
They make some very, very nice specialty malts that the Germans do. All three of these malts, very, very different. And they're all caramel or crystal 60s.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes to show we're looking to do this recipe. We've got this dialed in exactly as I want it, but I've always used just Breeze Crystal 60
Yeah.
because it's exactly the way I want it. And if you've never tried, maybe substitute that out, for a different malt there, just to see the difference. And there might be something that, I had no idea this existed, that this is so much more pleasant in my beer, or no.
I mean, I could see using the RX 60 in a nice amber ale, just kind of your standard or sort of an American amber ale, and I think it'd be spectacular.
I think a little bit in a West Coast IPA would be really nice too, and I bet you that lends to a nice orangish color as well. So I think both of those beer styles are fantastic recommendations for something like that. But wow, very, very different. Those three 60s.
Yeah. So again, something important to keep in mind as you choose a crystal malt, don't just go based upon color. Early on when I was brewing, that's what I would do is I'd look and say, oh, well, I'm kind of wanting to achieve this color, so I'll get a Crystal 40 or a Crystal 60 or a Crystal 20 or a Crystal 10. And that's a little bit problematic because the crystals just right there, as you saw, were so different in not only just the look of them, but then especially the flavor of them and the finish of them and sweetness and all those things. Now,
We should do this one last, I think.
okay, we'll do that one last. So there's also other specialty malts which are quite interesting. One of them is, oftentimes, I've used this in a number of Belgians, is Special B.
Let's get a look on that.
Here, we'll put it on the Tyler cam.
On the Tyler cam.
So Special B, as you look at it, this is from Dingmans, which is a Belgian.
Belgian company, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So as you look at the kernels themselves, I mean, they're actually still pretty nicely intact. It's not like it's been too beat up.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely see it's a darker color.
Dingmans makes some very nice malts.
Okay.
I think that's where your Melanoidin came from, or that was Weirmann's.
No, yes, that was Weirmann. So let's see, and we can put it out here and get a sample of it.
Did you get a look at that?
Yeah.
So this is a crystal malt or a caramel malt as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a little bit further down the spectrum. And what they've done when they malted this is just some different things with germination, I think.
Okay.
Before the kilning process. Very nice.
It is.
You get that.
I like.
You definitely get that dark crystal, and you know, so a lot of people have used it, and how I hear it described mostly is exactly what I'm getting. You get a lot of the dark raisins, maybe even some dark fruits, some dark plum, but a lot of that raisiny, and some of the sweetness I think is gone. It's kind of dry.
Yeah.
As well, but you could use this absolutely in a quad or a Dubel or something like that. Would give that nice kind of raisiny quality to it.
It also might be nice to throw it in something like a British dark mild.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could throw that in there for kind of a little something different. You have a low gravity beer, but with you want a huge complex malty characteristic to it. A little bit of Special B could kind of add that in there. Might be nice.
Well, it keeps going, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it does.
That's just rolling and rolling.
Now the next one we have is unique. I've only used this once or twice. It's called Golden Naked Oats. We'll put it on the Tyler cam for you. And I gotta admit, I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's not barley.
No, it's actually an oat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a naked oat, so it doesn't have any husk on it. And you would still crush them as you would just your normal grains. Actually, this makes a fantastic snack if you're ever just hanging out in the grain room and you finally you have yourself and you're famished and the orders are just coming in. You can take a little handful of those and they're just absolutely fantastic.
Really? Okay.
Now I have used them in several things. And they do about the same thing that any oat in a beer would do, like a Flato or something like that. You're gonna get some mouthfeel out of it, a little bit of creaminess, a little bit of body out of that. But this also has a little bit of a level band to it.
Okay.
And I think it's about 23, 25. And actually, in small amounts, you can just use it for a little bit of color. So if you're looking to just darken up something a little bit of Naked Golden Oats goes a long way to do that. I've done I do a Belgian single as well, not the Deacon Jim, which is absolutely fantastic, this guy's recipe. But I've done one we call Lola, I've done for years. It's actually it's an old Lutheran recipe, and they say that it dates back to Martin Luther himself. And it's been guarded by the Lutheran Church, and we went through some channels and got a hold of this recipe. I've done variations on it, many variations, and we've been making this beer for over 12 years. So I've tried a lot of different things. But for the people one time, we did one with a little bit of Swan, one with a little bit of Cara 8, and I used Simpson's Naked Golden Oats, and the third one called it the Naked Lola. And by far, everybody loved that beer, and it did. When you drank them side by side, it was crazy. It was just a little softer on the palate. There wasn't enough body there to change the style, but it was just a little easier drinking. Of course, we didn't use a whole lot of it, but something kind of neat to play around with, and they're delicious.
Yeah, I mean, it has, to me, it had almost like a little bit of a, like a Nature's Valley granola bar sort of
absolutely.
thing kind of going with.
It's very much. I think you could make a granola bar out of it. And it'd be, I said granola. That's throwback to my
One of them granola bars?
Yeah, my gal in Boston. She adds R's to all these words that are not supposed to have R's.
So this would be
little nuttiness there, I think, but no toast, and yeah, just delicious. Not very sweet, but it has a little sweetness to it.
This could be a great malt to add to your kind of paler colored beers or your more lighter tasting beers, kind of as Brock was saying, to add kind of a little something interesting to it, a little bit of creaminess, kind of round out the flavors. But then also, I don't know, it also kind of smells like breakfast to me. You know?
Yeah, it's absolutely honey bunches of oats.
Yeah. So
they're wonderful.
Yeah. So
I love them.
If you've not tried this malt, give it a try and see kind of what it's like. Now, Brock doesn't know this, but I've thrown in a mystery malt.
Okay.
So it's a mystery malt. We're going to see if he can figure out what it is.
There's no way I'm going to be able to taste
I think
this.
he can. So we're going to show you the mystery malt on the Tyler cam first. You know, as you look at it, looks kind of like any other
I was wondering
sort of
what
malt.
the question mark was there. Okay. All right. I like it. I like it. I'll support.
So I will move it from the Tyler cam over here and give Brock his due time to
Oh gosh.
to tell me. No pressure, Brock. 10 people are watching right now.
No, we lost half of our people. We must be boring today. So I can already see that the malts, the kernels are kind of small. I don't get a whole lot of aroma out of it as well.
Okay.
Which leads me to believe it's a base malt of some sort.
I'll give you a clue. It's one that you're very familiar with.
Is this the floor malted?
No,
No. Okay, then it has to. I'm thinking it's
It's
got
not
to
a
be
base-
American.
it's not.
Oh, it's not.
Wait. Nope, it's not. Although it is in North America, and it is used to be one of your favorite malts.
Oh, is this the? It is. Now I taste it. So I'm absolutely getting an aftertaste of honey. So this has to be Gambrinus honey malt.
It is. You got it.
Okay. Thank you for helping me along the way
problem.
here. Boy, this malt, whenever you crush it in a mill, absolutely smells
Oh, it's spectacular.
fantastic. Which is, I'm not getting a whole lot
No.
of honey just from the nose there, but you know, you pour out a sack of that or something, and you can definitely smell it.
Or when it crushes.
And as I've tasted it, you really do get a flavor of honey in your mouth. It just tastes like fresh honey. I loved this malt. When I first started brewing, I was like, we need a little sweetness. Let's put in a little honey malt. I was throwing handfuls of honey malt in pretty much every recipe that I ever made. Oh, this is great, but a little honey malt in there would be a little bit better. I've long since scaled that back as I've gotten better, and I've decided that I've gone for more classic styles, that sort of thing. Sometimes that sweetness is not, we don't need that.
No. However, we've oftentimes get people that come in and say, you know, I want to make a honey blonde, or I want to make a, you know, a honey lager or something like that.
Yep, and they come to the counter and they've got a jar of honey with them, and they're ready to throw that in fermentation.
Correct. Which is not a good idea.
Well, you can.
True.
The thing is that generally those sugars are so simple that the yeast just absolutely consumes it.
Yeah.
And generally you're not going to get a taste of the honey itself. Now what you will get is the aftertaste of something, whatever the bees were eating. So if you get a clover honey, sometimes you'll have that flavor in there, or the orange blossom, you'll have just a little bit of that orange blossom flavor to that beer, if the malt doesn't, you know, overwhelm it. But if you're looking for that true honey malt characteristic,
Yep.
the Gambrinus is really nice.
Yeah, I've had a few people that, you know, for making some sort of a honey beer, advise that they put a little bit of this in, you know, maybe anywhere from 3 to 5%, and then actually, you know, maybe go ahead and put in, you know, some actual honey into the fermenter as well. But this kind of gives it, you know, that honey characteristic that you're looking for in a beer if you're wanting a honey blonde or a honey whatever.
Yeah. Instead of just dumping a bunch of honey in there that you're not going to taste. Anyway.
Exactly, and that's expensive too. Honey's not cheap.
No, it's not. Now, could I, if I wanted to, could I put a little bit of honey in, say, my keg or secondary, something like that, to have a little more of that flavor?
You might be able to. The problem is the yeast is going to kick back up, especially in secondary. So the yeast is going to start back up again and start fermenting again, and we'll ferment those sugars because,
Right.
as Brock was saying, they are very simple sugars. You might be able to do it in the keg because it's cold enough that the yeast shouldn't be active at all. At least I wouldn't think yeast would do much at around 30-something
I
degrees.
think it would be really difficult to incorporate that into your beer besides just because that solution is cold.
Yeah.
I can just see the honey falling to the bottom and
Yeah,
sucking up into your first beer there or something. I don't know.
yeah, and that doesn't make for a tasty beer.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And again, like that, the sugars are so simple. I think it may even have enough to start fermentation there again. So
So as you're formulating your recipes, taste the malt. Think about some of the things that the different malts do. Know that a crystal is not just a crystal, or caramel is not just a caramel. They have different characteristics from different maltsters, and also realize that there are a lot of varieties in there that can add different flavors to your beer. So picture what you're wanting. Look at the style guidelines the BJCP has. Read about the malt. We've got descriptions on our website. As well as you can find other information out there, even direct from the maltsters.
absolutely.
So look at those.
Another thing too with the malt is it's going to change year to year as the crop goes. What you're using this year may not have the exact same yield in your beer the following year when you get a different crop.
Correct.
This is a live thing. They grow it. So again, climate and also what's happening with the soil at that time is going to make these different changes. As if there wasn't enough variables alone, already with different alpha acids and this and that, and what you can use in the thousands of varieties of yeast strains. Now you have even more varieties of malt that you can choose from,
Which is wonderful.
which is wonderful.
Now, we have one more malt that we wanted to show you, which we say this kind of towards the end because, for a couple reasons. One is because roasted malt is really powerful. Two, has a very strong flavor to it. And three, also because we wanted to mention the idea that sometimes when people are wanting to make a dark beer, they end up throwing a lot of roasted malt into there, and then they wonder why their beer is almost undrinkable. Well, some of these malts, especially some of the darker roasted malts, you've got to be very careful how much you add because they are very strong. Like this one we'll put over here on the Tyler can. This is roasted barley. And already you can see just by looking at it visually.
True roasted barley. This is actually Mutton's roasted barley.
I mean, it is quite dark. You can actually see. The kernels look good. Kind of the basic malt analysis we were talking. Very plump. But as you can see, it is a really, really dark brown, if not black. Now,
And we also have a whole slew of pale chocolates and dark chocolates, and we have dark wheats. We have all kinds of roasted barley, right?
Correct.
Anything that's been in a kiln for a while we can call roasted, right? Let's try this, shall we?
yes.
So definitely the aroma is coming off, first of all.
Oh yeah.
Now, because it is roasted, most all of that sweetness is completely gone. Any of those sugars that were in there have long since caramelized, and they're no longer in the malt.
Woo!
It's good.
It is.
It's definitely burny, but I'm not getting like that burnt sugar.
No.
It's pleasant. However, in that roast, you get that kind of coffee, toffee kind of notes out of it. This one's leaning, I think, a little bit definitely more towards the espresso taste.
Almost get like a burnt bread crust taste to it.
Okay, yeah, I get a little bit of that too.
But this would be a good one for adding, a nice dark color to your beer. But if this is suddenly 25% of your grain bill,
You're going to have an issue.
yeah. And sometimes we'll see people come in wanting to put together their own recipe, and that's great. And then we start looking at some of the malts, and it's okay. You've got not only do you have chocolate in there, and you've got this black roasted barley. You've got all these roasted malts. Suddenly, that's going to overwhelm the beer. And as we've talked about, and at the last episode, beer is about balance. Balancing your hops and your malt. It's about balancing the bitterness with the sweetness, balancing all of these flavors to make a really wonderful and tasty beer. And so when you're adding these roasted malts, add them carefully and cautiously.
Looks like Barry's got a question for us here. What roasted malt would you recommend? Was this Forvin? Irish stout?
For an Irish stout.
Oh, for an Irish. Forvin. I've never heard of that before.
I think a little extra keystroke the board.
For an Irish stout. I think that this would work very well for that. Just the Muntons roasted barley. I like a little bit drier in my Irish. I like my Irish stout to be a little bit of a drier kind of a thing, and less sweet chocolates.
Okay.
So I would maybe stay away from the pale chocolate. You're going to have more of a chocolatey taste to it. So I think that a little bit of this would go pretty good.
I think it would too. And I mean, although you want the stout to be dark, it doesn't take much of this in order to be able to darken your stout up. Along with, I know you're probably going to have a crystal or two in there. You'll probably have you may want to use the Muntons Planet as your base malt, which would be a great base malt for an dry Irish stout.
Absolutely. I know it says chocolate malt too on there, but a lot of times that chocolate can be very, very acrid and very, very bitter as well. I think even more so sometimes than a roasted or even a black malt. It's just very, very, just adds a very, just a crisp bitterness to the beer, which if that's what you're looking for, that's wonderful. Now this is kind of a chameleon. It can kind of do a lot of different things too. Like we could use a little bit of this in an Irish red.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, the roasted barley is great for adding a slight bit of color to a beer.
Just an ounce or two could add just a little bit of a amber color, amber hue to a regular beer.
Yeah, which can be nice. I mean, for those of y'all who are aiming for that Irish red, you can add a little bit of this, or maybe maybe you're wanting to make a red IPA or something like that. Just a little bit of roasted barley, so like 1% or less of your grain bill. So as Brock was saying, maybe an ounce.
Yeah, and some of those, recipes, they call for a little bit of roast in there as well. Nothing that is over the top like a stout, but just that touch of roast can sometimes be nice in your recipes as well.
So good question, Barry. And I think that's it for questions.
Putting malt bill together.
All right.
Yep, I think we're looking pretty good.
Okay. Well,
hello, Amy Jones. She's watching with us now.
Ah, very nice. So, I guess to kind of round things out, malted barley is kind of the heart and soul of your beer, and it begins to put together a lot of the flavors that you'll have, the color, the aromas, things like that that are going to be going on in the beer. So you choose a base malt based upon kind of what you're wanting to do of kind of a very neutral base malt. If you're wanting to do something very pale and kind of crisp like an American light lager or something like that. Something with, if you want a little more character, you choose perhaps like the Muntons or something that has a little bit more going on with it.
Sure. So say I'm going to do a German Pilsner.
Okay.
Would I just reach for my American two-row? No, probably not. I would go ahead and I would want something with a little more complexity, which that the German malt has in there, right?
Correct.
So you can also kind of it's a no-brainer with some of these. If you're doing a British mild, then obviously you want to go for your British crystals and stuff. Something that's going to lend more towards that style.
Correct.
As well.
And as you start choosing your specialty malts, realize they're going to have different characteristics to them. So think about some of the flavors that you get from them, not just the color. Don't just choose a crystal because you need a crystal.
Yep. That's some good information, I think, for the people, Jeff.
I think so too.
Is there anything else?
I think that's it for questions.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Introduction to Recipe Formulation Part 2, I believe, is complete.
It is. We Part 3 will come soon, which I think will start into the world of hops.
Okay, fantastic.
Do you like hops in your beer?
I do like hops in my beer. I like beer. Beer's good. Especially hoppy beers. No, but
True.
I like beer-flavored beer, so it kind of goes a long way.
Strawberry yogurt flavored beer?
Yes, it's. We actually have some strawberry yogurt flavored beer, and it came solely from the hops. So that should be an interesting.
Oh yeah.
Interesting thing as we kind of get into all the flavors that you can do. The one thing that I was going to say is just don't be afraid to venture out a little bit and to try some new things.
Yeah.
So many times people get into this rut where I've made this beer and I have to have this malt because this malt is the best. And I would just say, don't be so married to that malt. Venture out and try some others, because there's many maltsters out there that do a lot of fantastic things, and they all can lend a little bit differently to the flavors in your beer, which is fun to do.
Oh, it is. And you might discover that the malt you originally had is exactly what you want to stay with, and if so, great, stick with it. But then you might find something out there that makes your beer even better.
Absolutely.
And one more thing, I guess, to follow up with that, that can also be useful when competing, because sometimes using a malt in there that has just a little something that sets your beer apart from the one beside it or one before it or after it can be enough to catch the judge's attention and perhaps give you a little bit of a better score and knock you up there to perhaps medal status.
Indeed. Like this guy over here, the Ninkasi.
Or this guy. He has his fair share of awards too.
Oh, just here and there, but it's fun. But it's all from just trying these recipes out and really working on them, tweaking them just little by little. I mean, that's the funnest thing. I've got these recipes that we've done time and time again, and we've tweaked one little thing about it each time. Some of these recipes I'm on 15 or 16 different variations, and I still don't have it just quite what I would like it to be yet. But again, that's part of the fun of it. So I would just say be adventurous, and if you have any questions or if you're wanting to try anything, you can give either of us a call or anybody here at Texas Brewing. Again, thank you so much for all of your guys' support through this whole COVID time, and all of the orders keep pouring in, which is fantastic. I love to see how many people are out there brewing right now. Thank you for allowing us to come and talk to you daily. I've been really enjoying that too.
Yeah, and it's been good also to see a number of people who maybe got out of home brewing for a little while and are getting back into it.
Absolutely.
And that's because it's a great hobby, a hobby that we need to share and invite others to enjoy it too.
Yep.
So again, thank you much. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for your questions. And if anything comes up that you need to ask us, feel free to ask us. And
Yep. As always, stay
Stay at
safe,
home.
stay at home,
and brew it.
Cheers.
Cheers.